Hello, hello. Welcome to Impactful Reviews Made Easy. So before we get started, I would love to introduce Cami. So Cami joins me. She's the founder of Yellow House HR Consulting, where they work with leadership to help solve critical HR challenges, focus on leadership, transformation, engagement, performance, and culture. Hi, Cami. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much. Happy to be here with everyone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Wonderful. So today we're excited to talk about how to make the annual review process easy and impactful for employees. So we're going to share some tips and strategies for writing and then later delivering those annual reviews, which can be pretty stressful. So our goal is to help you feel more confident in what you've written and empower yourself and your employees so that they leave motivated, empowered, and set up for success in 2025. So if you've ever felt frustrated during a performance review, you are not alone. A Gallup poll in 2019 showed that only 14% of employees strongly agreed with their review. That means a whole lot of people did not. And they also saw that performance actually worsened a third of the time after review. So even top performers' performance dipped after that review period. So we need some help here. So anyway, think of this as a sneak peek. We are going to have a full in-depth webinar January 2nd, where we'll go into all of the topics we talk about today more in depth. But first, let's talk about what you might be feeling during review season. You might be worried about navigating awkward conversations, especially if you have some difficult situations that you're dealing with. You might have fear of disappointing some of your really good performers. Maybe they're expecting a little more. You might have worries about employees getting defensive, like those employees who don't agree with their assessment, upset, or not taking accountability, which can be really challenging to deal with. You could be dealing with employees who maybe feel entitled. You know, their expectations are way above or unrealistic of what is, what the working world is like currently. They could be expecting promotions or salary increases that aren't coming. So we want to acknowledge that those are all valid feelings and dive into some tips of how to overcome those. Before we jump into that, though, we want to acknowledge, Cami and I talked about this, is there's been a question, are annual performance reviews outdated?
Yeah.
And that's a constant conversation in companies we have both worked with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so our take of it, and what we'll talk about today is, while the annual review itself could be in question, performance conversations are crucial. And actually, it shows the more, the better. So really, our goal today is to help you with whatever structure you're currently in your company, whether it's an annual review, quarterly reviews, but to make them the most effective and empowering as you can. So now I'm going to turn it over to Cami for some best practices.
Thanks, Yvonne. Absolutely. So we've been thinking about what are the things that are going to be most important as you prepare for review season. I'll start by just saying preparation is everything, really. To the extent you can be planful, it's absolutely going to make a world of difference. Plan out how many reviews you have, your deadlines, and then back into a reasonable schedule that works for you. Set that commitment, stay on track, and stick with it. So starting with that, preparation will be huge. Let's talk about some best practices. First of all, you always want to be specific and actionable. Give clear examples, focus on what the employee can do to improve, and always build on their strengths. So that should be a focus area. So specificity and something that's actionable is super important. Next, it's always important to be incorporating data into your review whenever possible. Metrics is always really important and impactful. Concrete examples bring life to your feedback. And it's much more difficult to have a counterpoint when you have very specific data. Next, blend feedback into themes. Group similar feedback into key themes for a clearer picture of performance. It makes it easier to digest. Always use concise, simple language, keep it straightforward. We have the belief that less is really often more in this scenario when it comes to giving feedback. So it is important to kind of group the feedback into themes. Encourage two-way dialogue. This should not be you just talking at your employee the whole time. Make sure you're creating space for them to receive the feedback, take it in, share their perspective, and engage in the conversation. So you really do want to know what they're thinking in response to your feedback with them. And then always be empathetic and respectful, acknowledge the individual, not just their performance. So make sure that you're really seeing them so that they walk away feeling that regardless of the performance conversation, that they feel seen by you. And Yvonne's going to share even a few more best practices.
Yeah, a few more best practices. So one is to balance praise with constructive feedback. So there's kind of an unspoken rule in coaching is start with a positive. So you want to acknowledge the things that they're already doing well, that you value the things that they're doing well, and then highlight some areas of opportunity or growth where they can, improve or do other things.
Mm-hmm.
The thing you want to avoid is a feedback sandwich. And this used to be a management technique way back in the day. I remember being taught this, and it was actually a disaster, where you start with positive, give constructive feedback, and end with positive. The reason it doesn't work is the last thing kind of sticks in your mind. And so the best order is start with positive, give some constructive feedback, and then give them actions to do. Those actions will stick because it's the last thing you talked about, rather than this kind of sandwich deal that actually doesn't go very well. Keep them focused on the future, right? They can't go back and change something that was a miss or what they did in the previous year, but help them focus on using what they've learned this past year on developing things in the future and making those better. Be casual and low pressure. This is not the time to put your boss pants on and your loud booming voice. This is a one-on-one connection to really connect with your employee. You don't want to sugarcoat things, so don't be too nice. Be transparent, be honest, but also don't catastrophize, right? If they had a big mess, acknowledge it and talk about what they can do better. But don't make it seem bigger than it is. Because you don't want them to get stuck on that. You want to help them overcome it. So again, it's really about balance. And tailor your feedback, right? Make sure that the themes that you're hearing are actually in line with what you're telling your employee. And I'm a big believer in telling them where they stand. So if someone is your top performer on the team, it's okay to say, you're a top performer on the team and here's why. And absolutely, this is a must. When I was an HR partner, I told my managers this very specifically. If someone is not performing, you have to use those words, because otherwise it may go, they'll hear the critical feedback, but it won't land. If you say you are currently not meeting expectations, they will hear that. That will be a wake-up call. Now, it should not be a surprise. This should not be the first time they hear it, but you need to say those words because sometimes people don't pick up on the nuance of, hey, I'm getting critical feedback. A couple other best practices. One is send the review in advance. People need some time to read through and kind of process, and we all process differently. So ideally you send it to them, the morning of and block some time for them to read it. If you have to, schedule the meeting long enough so they can spend the first half hour reading it and let them read it. Don't interrupt. The worst thing you can do, and this has happened to me, where you let them read it in 5 minutes and you go, any questions? Mm-hmm. That's not enough time to absorb the feedback and think about, what has gone on. So give them ample time to process that so you can have a fruitful conversation.
And Yvonne, would you say even, sending in advance should not be a replacement for you giving the core messaging and the key messaging? It's not just have you read it? Do you have questions ever? Yeah.
You have to do both. You have to give them the document and not just say, do you have any questions? But then you actually dissect it and talk about it, right? Treat it like a business review. Like, we're actually going to spend some time talking about your performance. Here are the metrics that are documented, but it should be conversational. And then last but not least, separate your performance conversation from your compensation conversation. Now, it is a really good idea, and many companies tie compensation or pay to performance, but you don't want to have them in one conversation because people can get stuck on the number or the raise or the lack of raise or lack of bonus, and will argue about that versus first getting clear on performance. So you first want to get aligned on this is the performance assessment, and then at a later date in a separate meeting, pointing back to saying, based on that performance, this is now the compensation. You don't want to conflate the two because it can be really distracting and it's not a fruitful conversation.
They're just, if they know it's in the same conversation, they're going to say, just tell me what my raise is. Yeah.
Just tell me the number, and you actually want it to be about their growth and development, not just about, what they're getting paid. So if you have some other best practices of your own, we'd love to see them in the comments, and we'll absolutely respond to those. If we've missed any best practices, let us know. Or if you've used some that are really working for you, let us know in the comments. But so now let's move on to collecting feedback, right? In order to get a good review, you actually have to do collection of feedback. And it's essential to get a holistic view of the employee. One, it means getting data and feedback from a number of different sources and over the entire year. So a couple of tips, make sure that you are gathering feedback from peers, stakeholders, other people who are in rooms when you as a manager are not. And it's a really good idea to let your employee choose 3 to 7 of their own feedback providers. Let them pick those people. Now, I've heard arguments that, well, they're only going to pick the best people who like them. And you know what? That's actually okay, because you want to see the best of your employee. If there's a problem as a manager, you're highly likely to know about it. So, you don't have to worry about it being imbalanced. That's where your job as a manager is, to make your own observations. But get feedback from peers, stakeholders, and always remember to make it about the entire year. Don't get stuck. If there was a big mess, or even, the bias of there was just a big delivery, their whole entire year should not be based on one piece of performance, but throughout the whole year. So in our webinar in January, we'll go deeper into collecting, like what questions to ask, who to ask them of. And we're also really excited in that webinar to share some ChatGPT prompts that we've developed that will help you kind of take all that feedback and get some insights to make writing that review super easy.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's fun. I wish I would have had that tool. I remember, the last 2 weeks of December was always like mad season of writing reviews. Wrapping presents and writing reviews, wrapping presents and providing feedback. It was always a mad dash. And I love the use of ChatGPT and other AI just to be able to simplify some of that.
Yeah, it's definitely a time saver. Yeah, not to replace, but that's why we've got some prompts, but a time saver indeed. So let's talk about what's next. As Yvonne said, we are going to be doing a webinar. We're excited about that. That's going to be on January 2nd. At 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are going to go deeper into all of the topics we covered, just looking under the hood even further and giving you things that you should hopefully find even more supportive. So more tips and tricks. So be on the lookout for that. You don't want to miss it. If you join the webinar, we also have created a free written resource with all of the key takeaways. So you don't have to feel like you're trying to capture all of the things during the webinar. It's actually going to be a really useful resource that you can reflect on as you go into review season and feel like you've got all of the information that you need. And then we also are developing a more comprehensive guide. It's to reviews, and it's going to be available for purchase at a really reasonable rate. And this guide is designed to set you up for success, provide step-by-step support as you navigate performance review season. So that's also going to be something that we're
the one thing I wanted to also mention is if you're already in the middle of writing your reviews, this is still helpful because you can use these resources to audit. Have I followed all the best practices, right? It's kind of a good quality check of your work that you've already done. And even if you've been a manager for a decade, you and I both have lots of manager experience. It's always good to have an additional tool just to check, you know,
Yeah.
Am I busting my own biases? Have I followed the process for everyone? So we really look to make this resource valuable for if you're a beginning manager or a longtime leader to help get through check. And in true fashion of all kind of free resource one pagers, we kind of have to chuckle because it's about 3
Yes.
pages or more.
Right.
So
that was our intent, but we had too much information. We felt compelled to share. So yeah, hopefully, I think you'll find that it's going to be meaningful to you. So overall, just wanted to thank everyone for your time. Hopefully it's been really, helpful. We're here to support you. So feel free to reach out to Yvonne or myself at any point in time with any questions. We're certainly grateful for you joining and making the time during this busy, really time of year, and wishing you all a really wonderful holiday season. So hopefully we'll see you on January 2nd.
yes, happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Cheers.